The Bad Case of Stripes.
A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. Read by Grammy and Uncle Ray.
Wait, did they actually say that?
No, I'm saying that. Camellia Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camellia was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed. Oh my goodness. What happened? Oh,
Can't speak.
look at her. She
Look at
screamed.
him.
Oh no, her mother ran to the room and she screamed too. Oh my heaven, she cried. You're completely covered with stripes. This was certainly true. Camellia was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Miss Cream felt Camelia's forehead. You feel all right, she asked. I feel fine, Camellia answered, but just look at me. You get back in that bed
happened to her?
this instant, her mother ordered. You're not going to school today. Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say. And she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. Looks like a rainbow.
I know what happened to her.
Look at her tongue, Ray. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camellia. Most extraordinary, he exclaimed. I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, running nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching? No, Camellia told him. I feel fine. Well then, Dr. Bumble said, turning to Miss Cream, I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me. And off he went. Look, even her tongue had stripes.
I know, that's crazy.
Look at this one. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camellia. They called her Camellia Cran and Knight of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripe turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out into stars.
That's weird.
Poor Camellia. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, let's see some purple polka dots. Sure enough, Camellia turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, checkerboard, and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and color, and poor Camellia was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV.
Alphabets.
Poor thing.
Camouflage.
Well, yes, I see, Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day.
Bacon.
I think I'd better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over. About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young. Then the specialist went to work on Camellia. They squeezed and jabbed and tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. Well, it's not the mumps, concluded Dr. Grop. Or the measles, said Dr. Sponge. Definitely not chickenpox, put in Dr. Cricket. Or sunburn, said Dr. Young. Try these, said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. Take one each before you go to bed, said Dr. Grop, and then they filed out the door, followed by Dr. Bumble.
There's bacon on her forehead.
Oops. Oh my goodness, the poor thing.
She looks like a pill.
Camellia took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant multicolored pill with her face on it.
Why is there a pill in the mirror?
Oh my goodness. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called. But this time, instead of the specialist, he brought the experts. Dr. Gord, Mr. Millen were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camellia was poked and prodded, looked and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers, then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. "It might be a virus," he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camellia. "Or possibly some form of bacteria," said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. "Or it could be a fungus," added Dr. Gord instantly. Camellia was covered with different colored fungus splotches. The experts looked at Camellia, then at each other. "We need to go over these numbers again, back to the lab," Dr. Gord explained. "We'll call you when we know something." But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure.
That is a weird, very bad case of stripes.
By now, the TV news had found out about Camellia. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon a huge crowd was camped out in the front lawn.
Uh-oh.
Look at all those people. Oh my goodness, the poor thing.
She saw it.
All right.
She saw it on TV.
The creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called had only added to poor Camelia's strange appearance until it was so hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked.
A tiger
Look
tail.
at her. Here, I just sit down so the light.
A feather of a bird.
Oh my goodness, you can barely see her face anymore. Sit down
A tree little.
so you can see the lights. Sit back there.
She's in her walls and beds.
Oh my goodness. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camellia. "Close your eyes," she said. "Breathe deeply and become one with your room." "I wish you hadn't said that," Camellia groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth. Her nose was a dresser, and her two paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. "What are we going to do?" cried Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse." She began to sob.
That's a bad case of stripes.
That afternoon, Mr. Cream heard a quiet knock at the door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. "Excuse me," she said brightly, "but I think I can help." Oh, look how cute she is.
That's a good girl.
She went to Camelia's room and looked around. "My goodness," she said with a shake of her head. "What we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen." She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. "Here," she said, "these might do the trick." "Are those magic beans?" asked Mrs. Cream. "Oh, my, no," replied the kind old woman. "There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you'd like some, wouldn't you?" she asked Camellia. Camellia wanted a big, heaping plateful of lima beans more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. "Yuck," she said. "No one likes lima beans, especially me." "Oh, dear," the pretty old woman said sadly. "I guess I was wrong about you." She put the beans back in her bag and started towards the door. Camellia watched as the old woman walked away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. "Wait," she cried. "The truth is, I really love lima beans." "I thought so," the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camelia's mouth.
That's crazy,"
said Camellia. And just like that, Camellia wasn't the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate the lima beans and wanted the lima beans she wanted and never had even a touch of stripes again.
Uh-oh, there's a rainbow on it.
Bow.
But
And that's the story of a bad case of stripes.
she forgot to see the bow rainbow. Bye.